I work with Emirates Airline.
Okay.
We work in pilot training, basically making sure that the flight sim behaves and feels like an aircraft.
You're a founder of a tech company, and you're also an investor.
NFTwist is I started this platform with 3 other people. You download our mobile app, you scan a QR code, and you're part of that NFT club that this business has.
You're simplifying the process for businesses to go in and create a rewards program for themselves.
Absolutely. If you go to a busy restaurant, like if I'm an NFT holder, just literally it's like a fast track pass through NFTs, and basically everything is tokenized on the blockchain.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Happy to be here.
There's a few reasons why, when I was looking back at why I wanted to have a chat with you. And obviously, I'm very interested in what you do business-wise. But there's a characteristic that I even had to write down when I was just thinking about what makes you interesting. And it's pretty much how you're driven by not only the professional side of things, but also in everything else that you do. So for example, health-wise, I don't think you think too much about progressing or doing something to improve your health. You just do it. And it feels like it's effortless. Social aspect as well. Like I think you bring people together. You are a social butterfly. I think I mentioned that before. But it's I see you. You're always on the go and you're always alert. And that not a lot of people have that. I don't know if you recognize that you have that, but not a lot of people have it, which I find very interesting. Even in the small details, you kind of like put 110% and you don't half-ass anything. So I'm like, okay.
We try to.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, that's probably one attribute that would help in business.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, it never just happened overnight either, right? So like I do come with somewhat of a backstory that has made has made me who I am today, right? So If you look at it, I mean, it's not just I basically was born this way, right? I don't believe that. I mean, everyone is born some way, but at the end of the day, the way you go through hurdles in life and learn from those, that's what makes you who you are, right? The social butterfly aspect, we'll start with that. So I would say I was always a social person. And the fact that I ended up living in many different cities, 3 countries growing up, now the 4th, had made me meet a lot of different people. And one way or another, you'd find somewhat or something to actually like connect with someone through, right? So meeting like people from Canada, that's a very diverse culture, and then living in Saudi for 3 years, I got introduced to like how like different Arabs are, and Arabs in Canada are different than how Arabs are in Saudi.
Right.
And then the greatest thing that ever happened to me was living in Cairo for 8 years, where you just have to become street smart to get around the city, not even just like to get through your day-to-day life, right?
It's fast-paced there. And
it is actually, it's both fast-paced and slow, and like everyone is in a rush to get somewhere, and like the way you have to do things or say things to get things done, you know, like you learn literally how to deal with different social classes, different cultures, different people. Like in Egypt, I had friends who would go to like a public school and friends that I went to private school with, and it would cost a lot of money, right? And like you just learn about how everyone is and like what their background is in terms of like how they deal with things, right? So you watch and observe, and then you literally like see if you could actually make use of that information and actually apply it to your own life.
The multilingual aspect, because you speak a few languages.
I do, yes.
And I keep learning about that every time I hang out with you. It's insane. But is there a connection there where you felt like you lived in many different places, you wanted to connect with the people, you're like, let me learn the language too?
You know what? I have my parents to thank for. So when I was a little kid in Toronto, right, my mom and my dad were like, why send him to an English school? And we were privileged enough to be in Canada where you have French schools, right? So so they sent me to a French school for the age of 5, 6, and 7. Then we moved to Saudi. But in those 3 years, I learned a decent amount of French. And then like they're like, okay, well, he's gonna speak English. He's gonna learn English anyways. We live in Toronto, and he's gonna speak Arabic at home. So like right off the bat, I was lucky enough to be introduced to 3 different languages, right?
Okay.
And then I met my ex-wife, who was a major in linguistics, and she spoke Spanish, so I learned a decent amount of Spanish from her too, right? But I don't know what it is. My mom always told me when I was like younger, at an early age, she's like, you actually have a thing for picking up a language like this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a God-given gift or just something that happened to be because of I got introduced to different languages at a younger age. So you just have to like, I don't know, like I want to improve my Spanish and my French even further, but it seems like I never have time for that. But that's an excuse.
Yeah. Well, it's and you do a lot of things, so maybe it's
Absolutely.
a valid excuse. And language is sort of a code that you have to understand. And not to segue into your background, but you are an engineer, mechanical engineer, if I'm not mistaken.
Aerospace engineer with a mechanical background, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's some connection there with your brain being very engineer driven, that you can sort of decipher languages quicker and know how to use them.
It could be actually. I never thought of that. I mean, it could be something. At the end of the day, it is true actually. So Arabic, and I'm very proud to be strong in Arabic, like not the Egyptian Arabic, the actual Arabic.
It's not easy.
You know, it's not easy, right? And if you look at sentence structure in Arabic, I had an Arabic teacher in Egypt, and he was like very strong, like in Arabic, right? This is how I got there. And he would always say that it's actually like a math equation. If you look at Arabic, it's like a math equation, and like the way he would explain things. So that's actually very interesting that you say that. It's kind of true.
Interesting.
It's very true actually.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So there is some connection maybe there.
Yeah.
Did you know you wanted to get into engineering? Like as a young kid growing up, did you feel like it's something you were drawn to, or was it the typical, immigrant background where you got to be a lawyer, engineer, and something
doctor.
like that? Yeah, or a doctor. Which one was it for you?
I'll tell you what, actually, no, I did not know. And interesting enough, so let's take a step back and look at one thing you said. You were like, when you do something, you do it 110%.
Yep.
And as a kid, that was never me. Mo was the kid that always half-asses everything, right? At home or whatever. It's like, if I can do it like this, why not do it? And then like my dad, I would drive my dad nuts like regarding this. And he would be like, in Arabic is like ad-duqqa wal-itqan, precision and actually doing a good job. You have to keep doing that. So he kept telling me over and over, and he's like, you'd never be a good engineer. My younger brother, who's actually also an aerospace engineer, he's the complete opposite. Super organized when we were kids. Like literally, he would be pissed if his shoelace is not tied the right way.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
and he'd literally stop us in the street, be like, no, I have to tie it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So basically, growing up, I was told I don't have what an engineer takes. Sometimes I was told that, right?
Okay.
So I honestly, and I had a thing for watching, what was it called? ER, Scrubs. So I was like, oh yeah, I like this. Maybe I'll be a doctor. And then honestly,
cool.
yeah. And then my uncle, so he took me once to his clinic, and then like he was like showing me some like surgeries. This was when I was like 15 or 16, because I was like, okay, let me try to see what this thing is actually like, this whole profession and practice of medicine. And he was an internal medicine doctor or a specialist, I don't know.
Something,
yeah, basically he deals with like if you have to like get a cholecystectomy, which is like maybe I pronounced that wrong, but anyway, it's removing your gallbladder, which is a surgery I did a couple of years ago.
Okay.
You do it with like a laparoscope, so like it goes in. So I was watching that and I'm like, fuck this shit.
That's not
this
me.
is not what I want to do, right?
Okay.
But then here's now another side of the equation where I, again, growing up, living in Canada, traveling a lot, I'd be fascinated every time we're at the airport. Like one of my favorite places to ever be is the airport. I love airports.
Yeah.
There's something about it, just like going on to that next destination, next step, whatever it is, right?
Adventurous.
Exactly, right? Like, who knows? Like, you land, you go visit a country you've never visited before if you're in a layover. And that was for me as a kid, right? We would always transit from Toronto to Frankfurt and then from Frankfurt to Cairo when we would go home for vacation to see family from Canada. So to me, airports were fascinating. And then I was lucky enough to have been brought on to the cockpit of a 747. This was before 9/11.
Okay.
So we were midair and like we were like literally flying business. We got an upgrade. I can't remember why. We never flew business, but anyway, it was a nice upgrade.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like the cockpit is there. It's a 747, so it's an upper decker jet, right? So it's like a double decker jet. We're on the upper deck. And the cockpit door was just right there. And then like my dad asked the flight attendant if like we could go. And then I saw this at the age of 7. It like completely changed how I see things. So it's always been a passion, you know, in me, like aviation, flying, aerospace, and all that. And then like one day we were in Egypt, and I remember that day, and I was playing squash with my buddies. I used to play squash growing up. It's a very popular sport in Egypt because the former president used to play that sport, squash.
Who was the president?
Hosni Mubarak.
Hosni Mubarak. Okay, yeah,
So
okay.
he well funded that sport all over Egypt and made it accessible to people,
Nice.
right? Just for his love of the sport, which
Yeah.
is very interesting. So we were playing squash, and then it was raining outside, and it was windy. And then basically outside of the squash courts, there was like this fence, and like the wind is blowing, and the air is blowing, right? And then the rain is also blowing, and then I see the rain move in a different way over the fence rather than the rest of the, like literally it's blowing. It's like it's 4 lines blowing, right? But over the fence, it's like doing something like this,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, why? You know, I'm like, why is the airflow changing there? And then I started learning about this, and like there's something called aerodynamics. And then I realized that I have a knack or a gift for the ability to visualize airflow. Even we can't see it, right?
Yeah.
So we went over.
And how old were you? Sorry again.
This was like at the age of 16.
Ages.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I do want to do this thing called aerospace engineering. And I start looking into it. And like, obviously in Egypt, they do have it, but it's just maintenance on airplanes, which is a very cool job.
Yeah.
But it's very like procedural oriented, standardized, right? Because everybody has to maintain the airplane the same way. And I always knew I had this creative side in me that basically, again, if I could kind of see and visualize how air flows without seeing it, just by understanding what's happening, I thought this creativity and this gift would not be wasted on just doing procedural work, which is the same thing where people ask me, why are you not a pilot, or were you ever interested to be a pilot? I'm like, I actually did a couple of flying lessons in Canada, but at the end of the day, I knew that career is not for me. It's an amazing job. Don't get me wrong. It's one of the most prestigious jobs ever. Again, airports, you're always on the go, like, you know, like you're well respected. Yeah, absolutely.
It's very exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, like, they always say there are 2 professions that will help you pick up a girl at a bar: a surgeon, because she knows you make a shit ton of money and you're good with your hands, and then a pilot, right?
I see it.
Absolutely.
I have a few friends that are pilots as well, and I see it work well for them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny enough, being the nerd I am, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get into aerospace. I'm going to start solving these long-ass equations to just calculate the height of that boundary layer, which is the airflow over that fence.
Yeah.
At a certain speed, at a certain height, with density and all that. Not to get really too much deep into it, but then I realized that another thing like that really drove me crazy, and that was my first year of university. I'm like, once you open the tap, why does the water flow this way? Why is it not flowing that way? Why is it just coming down as a stream? And why is that little sudden response when you open the tap, the water like somewhat wobbles or whatever, and then it becomes a nice stream? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all of these things were something that really like kept me going and wanted to have me basically, how could I say this? Like I wanted to have myself understand the science behind it. And then engineering just happened. I mean, I had my days, my fun days in university, partying and whatever. But then when push came to shove, I was like, no, I love this major. I'm graduating. I'm doing this. And ever since, it's been a good deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you do now, just so people know?
So right now, I work with Emirates Airline. We work in pilot training. So we do day-to-day maintenance. We work on designing new scenarios that challenge pilots, that make them better pilots. So I made my career in simulation, right? So simulation is basically, well, flight simulation, because simulation could be anything, but flight training and flight simulation, flight simulators, pilots go through that before jumping on the real jet, because then they can make mistakes, they learn from their mistakes, they get a feel for the actual airplane. Again, it's a part of training. You won't go for a fight without training, right?
Okay.
So basically what we do at Emirates, we take pilots, we maintain the simulators, me, my team. I'm in charge of something called performance, which basically making sure that the flight sim behaves and feels like an aircraft, both subjectively and objectively. So with data, we look at the aircraft data, we look at the simulator data, we make sure they match to a degree of confidence to be able to say, okay, that machine is not just an expensive video game. It's a representation of what the aircraft actually is. So that's the objective side. The subjective side, I just sit in the FO seat or a seat behind the captain, and we start tweaking things and basically making sure that whatever the sim is doing in terms of motion, vibration, or sound, or whatever it's supposed to do is exactly what the aircraft would do in the same case.
Do they tell you have to actually fly behind a pilot as well?
No.
No. Able to, for you to experience it too, or you don't need to?
No, these are very rare occasions. I never had to do it in my life. Some companies, if you take a certain role where you're developing a new simulator, so let's say you're not just developing a new simulator, you have an aircraft, let's say a private jet just went on the market, right? And you want to gather data. So you have two ways to do that. You could actually get the data from the actual jet manufacturer because they did their flight tests and they have all that data. Or basically you as a sim manufacturer, you would go and instrument the aircraft. You would hire a pilot and you would fly the aircraft out with engineers in the background, which is what you're referring to. Yeah. And the engineers would collect the data. And those engineers basically would be usually consultants that worked for the same job with jet manufacturers, right? Mm-hmm. And then you would have a crossover between the engineers that are collecting data and then the sim engineer that wants that data to be actually utilized and usable. So the sim engineer would tell them, okay, we're going to do this and that. I need this kind of data. I need that kind of data. And then...
Interesting. Okay.
You see where I'm going with this?
I do, yeah. So I think the airplanes that you work on are already established, and that probably has been done to them already. Is it Airbus or Boeing or
it's both. So in the fleet, Emirates, their fleet basically is the A380, which I'm sure you flew on. Mm-hmm. It's that double-decker, super. Sweet. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. It is, right?
Yeah, it's hard to go back.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like the seats are wider, it's comfortable. And then you have the Boeing 777, which is a very powerful aircraft. Mm-hmm. Their engines are very strong. So yeah, those are the two jets. And now Emirates are getting an Airbus A350, which is a super comfortable airplane to fly on.
It's smaller, but I heard wider body.
Yeah, so it's an XWB. It's a extended wing body. Basically, it's a narrow body airplane, but how can I say this? The cabin runs at a pressure closer to Earth, so you don't feel that much discomfort. When I explain this, literally, it's like if you are on Earth, the pressure is basically XYZ, not to get into it. And the higher you go up, the less pressure there is because there is less air mass pressurizing you, acting on you, right? So you're standing on Earth, you have all of that air acting on you as a pressure. The higher you go up, when you're up, let's say you're on Everest, the pressure is lower because you have less air acting on you. You get it?
No, that makes sense.
So that delta in pressure causes discomfort in flying. So if you could run the cabin to a pressure closer to Earth, it's as if you're walking on the street. You don't feel that huge pressure difference. That's why business jets, and actually it's an interesting topic. I don't know how we're drifting here, but jet lag doesn't only come from the time difference. It comes from the difference in pressure while you're flying. That actually is a factor that feeds into jet lag.
Really?
Yes. So business jets, they run a pressure of 2,500 to 3,000 feet. Some business jets do. And it's like literally as if you're on some mountain, which is not a big mountain, like as if you're hiking up, it's completely fine. You know what I mean? So you feel less of a jet lag when you land because of the delta. The difference in pressure is very small.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyhow, back to our discussion. So it's both Airbus and Boeing. We're getting that 350. We just qualified the flight simulator. It's been on the news. It's a great machine.
And is it a, because I know, just speaking with my pilot friends, they tell me that flying an Airbus is way different than flying a Boeing. And with Airbus, a lot of the things are automated, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely correct.
Boeing, you're actually driving, like flying it.
Absolutely correct.
Was it a learning curve for you as well to have different systems that you needed to learn?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you go through different flight simulators, so I have like gone through more than 15 different variations of aircrafts on flight sims, and I didn't really need to know the exact details of every system because every single airplane flies the same unless it's a helicopter. The dynamics and the mechanics of flight are completely different. I had my time doing an internship with Bell Helicopter in Canada. It's a complete different animal. Helicopters, they fly because they're ugly, so the ground repels them.
Is that the joke in the industry?
Yeah, it is absolutely a joke. But then the actual airplanes, they're nice and smooth and curvy, so they fly on their own. So to answer your question, to get to the specifics, like right now in my job, to understand if a system is not working, because now I'm looking into more of a generalist scope of things, right? So sometimes we have a system that I've never dealt with, but we have an issue on it. So we have to go dig into the code and then look at the Airbus documentation and do that.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, it's a different philosophy. Yes, Airbus versus Boeing. Airbus came out with this fully on automated something called fly-by-wire, where when you control the airplane on Airbus, you're not actually talking to the exact surface. So when you do this, you're not moving the elevator at the back, the tail.
Okay.
You're talking to a computer, and then the computer determines if it's actually safe for the control surface to move that way or not. So let's say you yank on the stick, the computer will be like, you're an idiot. I'm not doing that.
Interesting.
You know, whereas Boeing, it's literally directly controlled. The moment you do that, there's no little computer you talk to in between, right? You're just talking to the actual mechanical system, and the mechanical system takes whatever you command out of it.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like driving a Mustang manual versus a Tesla.
There you go.
Autonomous.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I know there's a few questions about. I want to get into your business, and I know you're an investor as well. We're going to talk about this, but I'm curious about when you were studying, when you went into engineering and aerospace engineering. Did you know you wanted to specifically be in this position that you're in right now?
In this field of flight simulation?
Yeah,
absolutely not.
What was the goal?
I tell you what, it's actually a funny story because sometimes things find you, right? You just position yourself, and this is, by the way, one of the only laws that I believe in. Like the back of my hand is like positioning. It's all about where you position yourself. You literally, it comes from thermodynamics actually. So for a particle to get carried away with the wind, it has to have enough energy to escape the surface. Let's say you're heating up a coffee mug. You see that little stream of vapor coming out of that coffee mug. That vapor, these are particles, right? Yeah. Particles of air and whatever water vapor that have enough energy to escape the surface level and be displaced at a position high enough for the wind to carry them away.
That's
right?
Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So that law of positioning is absolutely something that you have to employ in your day-to-day life, in your career, whatever you do. Like you're doing whatever you can to position yourself. And if something comes out of it, great. If it doesn't, you did what you can. You know what I mean?
I think so. Maybe the way I would think about it, or the words I would use, is you can't predict when the opportunity would come. You gotta just work until it comes your way and be prepared for it. So maybe that's what you mean by positioning yourself.
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is preparing. It's a whole lot of things, right? So flight simulation. I never chose this field. It chose me, and I'll tell you the story. So I graduated, not the top of my class, and I was okay with that. I did a lot of things outside of academia that prepared me for the real world. So I didn't have to get straight A's, but I built a good network. I went through different projects and stuff. So that exposure was great. And I also had a social life. We used to play soccer together in university. So that was important for me.
It was fun times too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Those soft skills, you won't develop them by reading a book or acing an exam.
Right.
Which are as important for the real world,
if not more.
Absolutely. Especially in business, it's pretty much almost everything usually.
Exactly.
So graduated, I applied for every single company in the industry you could think of. Not like every company, but every field in the industry, except for flight simulation. I completely forgot about it. Actually, the only time I was ever exposed to the idea of flight simulation were 2 times. One, we had a simulator project in university, and it was basically you work on building a flight simulator with your colleagues. And it was like a 5-year project. So you jump in and you start like the visual and how you like have the people in the flight simulator see where they're going and all that. And then like the motion and the sound and the feel and all of that. And I was like, I don't want to work on this. I wanted to work on the helicopter project, because I thought helicopters were actually cool. And then like this whole internship came out of it. And I was actually very happy with that. So I applied for Airbus, Boeing, companies that deal with calculating performance and actual like landing distances and takeoff weights and fuel consumption. There are all computers that do that, right?
Okay.
And those computers run off actual equations. So companies that do that, companies that actually manufacture engines, Rolls-Royce. I was interviewed by Rolls-Royce UK on the phone.
Nice.
I didn't go to Derby, UK, but it was for a stress engineer. So it was basically everything you could think of, I applied to. And then I applied to a job on Indeed. I don't know if you remember Indeed.
It still exists as well.
Yeah. So I applied to a job on Indeed, and I was basically playing FIFA with my friends while applying. They were playing, and like I'm like, I'll apply for this job. It says like a flight dynamics, aerodynamics. I'm like, this is right up my alley. So I apply, and then literally a guy calls me. He's like, I have a customer that's looking for an engineer who understands like flight dynamics, the science and the mechanics of how airplanes fly, aerodynamics, performance, how like an airplane performs. I'm like, you got the right guy. Let's do this.
Nice.
Take me to the interview. I'll be ready. And then basically at the end, I'm like, can I ask what kind of companies? Like, it's called CAE. I'm like, CAE. I literally, like, I'm on the phone with him. I'm like Googling. And then I'm like, flight simulation. How did I not apply to that field in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And then it just happened, man.
Okay.
Like, it just happened. I was applying to a job. I thought it was like, again, it's like some autopilot designer or something, some company that calculates some of these things, because it was like a role through a recruiter. The posting was through a recruiter.
Okay.
So it just found me, and I never thought of it twice. And honestly, it's been a very fulfilling career for 2 reasons. One, I go to bed every day after a long day of work, even if it was a hard day at work, but knowing that what we do makes flying and aviation safer.
Yeah.
So for that, there's purpose in that. And the second thing is I just like get to touch all different systems. Whereas if I'm working for Boeing or Airbus or an engine manufacturer, I'll be working on just one system or one subsystem, right? Where you actually get to experience the whole thing. We should fly together. I'll bring you over.
I would love to try it.
I'll bring you over.
So one thing.
While your girlfriend's here, yeah.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've noticed about myself is I was always drawn to planes for some reason. That's why I was able to ask you a few questions, because all I do is sit down with a few people I know that are pilots, and they just explain to me how it works. And maybe part of it is me making sure that I'm going to be safe on a plane, knowing some of my friends that fly them. But also, I mean, we've both been in Toronto. There's a lookout space in Toronto and Mississauga.
Yeah.
I take 2 chairs.
Dixon Road.
Yeah. And then we get shishas, by the way. We get hookahs. We light them up, and for 3-4 hours, that's what we're doing, me and my friends.
That's cool.
And we see planes land and take off. So I was always fascinated by planes and how they function. And for some reason, it's like when I see a plane land or take off, I'm always that little kid that's like, how is this happening? How is this working?
Yeah, like 200, 300, 380 is 500-ton machine, if not more sometimes.
I look at it from how big it is. I'm like, it doesn't look like it's flying. It looks like it's there, and then 2 seconds it's there. Like it's so slow and just up in the air, very smooth because it's a big plane, and it's always shocks me.
It's just
I don't know how to maybe because I don't know how to explain it. I'm in awe, but maybe if I get into the details, I go like, all right, okay, this is how it works.
No, actually, I still find it fascinating. I love taking videos. You know, like one of my favorite videos is actually in landing. You just come down and you do something called a flare, where you make the surface area of the airplane bigger because you want to slow down, right? So you go in and you flare, so just to have more drag, more wind. And then you just touch down. It's like it's one of
that's where the wings extend to create more.
The flaps.
Flaps. Okay.
Yeah, they slow you down and they keep you in the air at slower speeds.
Yeah. One of my favorite, honestly, times on a plane. I make sure I'm sitting right next to the window seat where I could see it happening as we land.
That's cool.
You see the flaps open up.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that's very cool.
That's for another time.
For sure. No, flying and traveling is fun. So yeah, man, it's just one of those fields where if everyone doesn't do their job right, lots of lives are at risk. Starting from the very small job of someone literally like putting on a bolt, and we've seen what happened with Boeing. Funny enough. I mean, it's not funny, but it's just crazy how like very small errors. Like I tell you what, the industry is running at a very high standard that if you have a fraction of a millimeter crack in an engine, that engine doesn't fly.
Yeah. And
they inspect with every flight after landing, before takeoff, you have a maintenance team inspecting the airplane. So
that's reassuring, and I think absolutely. I've always heard even some pilots say, there's more accidents on the road than flying, and I think it's for that reason that they run a tight ship, and I think it's heavily regulated, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So there's to get into the industry, you really have to demonstrate probably ultimate professionalism and following the guidelines.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we hear about pilots doing crazy things, but when it's flying time, like I have friends who are pilots who go do crazy stuff. When it's time to fly,
they put on the captain's hat
absolutely.
And they take it seriously.
It's a complete different person,
Yeah, I wanted to also spend some time on the business side of things, and the reason why I wanted to dive into who you were, because it's gonna make more sense, at least for me right now, when you talk about what you do and maybe how you landed. Like, what's the origin story of your business, right? And you're a founder of a tech company, and you're also an investor.
I am also an investor.
Can you tell us a little bit more about?
So when we were in Egypt, my mom would work in a finance firm, right?
Okay.
Where they were like stockbrokers, right? So I got introduced to the whole concept of buying and selling stocks through her, my uncle, at a very early age. The idea is basically you invest in a company, and that company, you're literally becoming an owner of a fraction of the company, which is you buy a share, right?
Yeah.
And then when the company grows, and if it's in a market that actually grows, like you have a market that's growing at a decent compound annual growth rate, and that company is doing something in that market, it's going to grow, and then your share size of the company will stay the same, but the value of it will grow. So I'm like, okay, great. This is actually wonderful, because then I don't have to keep saving money and stacking money to make more money. I could just put in £100 today, and then like in 10 years it becomes like 1,000 or whatever. And then that 2008 crash happened. And it was very devastating, because I lost my $200 investment that was over a course of 3 years, I'm like, no.
I worked hard for this.
Exactly. And my uncle is looking at me. I was like, I was what, 15? And I was like super pissed. And he's like, what were you going to do with the money? I was like, I was going to like travel with my friends. We were going to go to Sahel, which is like the north coast in Egypt, like on the Mediterranean.
I've been.
And he's like, look at this. And like, I'm like, people shooting themselves and jumping off of balconies in Wall Street. Like, people took their own lives.
They did.
So
they did.
He's like, your loss is not that bad. Relax. This is something that happens. But honestly, 2008 was somewhat of a very black swan event. It's like the blackest swan event I've seen, right? More than COVID, in my opinion.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was so unexpected.
Yeah.
It was very unexpected. You watched a few movies and read some books, and apparently there's some people who saw the cracks.
Oh yeah.
But
Big Short. Anyone who never watched The Big Short should watch The Big Short.
Yeah, fascinating.
Sure.
I think I watched it a few times.
Yeah.
Not only because of the story, but I'm not sure who the director was, but
Yeah.
they told the story in a very nice way.
Absolutely
and
agreed.
You were invested.
Yeah.
You were really invested.
Absolutely agreed.
And they're real characters too. So like, I think if you go watch some interviews of the people that represent
Michael Burry,
yeah, they would tell you, okay, a lot of this was maybe not true, but this was also true. This is actually what happened. I stood up in the middle of a conference and said what I said and whatnot. So so it was somewhat reflective of what was going on,
the reality of things.
Yeah,
interesting.
And so that's where you were.
So that's how I got introduced to investing. And then basically, 2017, me and two of my closest friends in Canada, one who just got married in June in the UK. I went to his wedding, beautiful wedding.
Okay.
They were talking to me about Bitcoin, but it wasn't the first time ever I was introduced to Bitcoin, right? The first time ever I was introduced to Bitcoin was in 2012. Me and my housemate Mitch used to watch the Premier League together every Saturday. So he'd wake up, put on his what is it called? Strudels or whatever, something toaster, and we'd go up and watch the game. And then he's like, dude, read this. It's like a paper called the Globe and Mail. And he's like, it says that this is the currency of the future. And Bitcoin was like $200. And anyhow.
At that time, 2012?
2012, yeah, it was $200. I think it was either 2012 or 2013, one of those years, right? Okay. And the paper says it's the currency of the future. I'm like, all right, just put on the game, man. Right?
Yeah.
So I literally, I faded it then. And then in 2017, I'm like, guys, I heard about this. It was $200. They're like, dude, it's like almost $4,000 now for one Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, fuck it, sure. I just started my career. I have some disposable income. I finally have money to actually invest. So I started buying 0.005 of a Bitcoin, which so we had basically an exchange called Coinbase, which is still around, but then back then it was stupid because it would limit your weekly amount of money you can invest to 500 Canadian dollars, where if you wanted to actually even buy more, you couldn't. I don't know why or what was the reason behind it, and I really didn't dig too much into it. But anyway, I put in the equivalent of $2K over the course of 4 months back then. And then I saw it wasn't just Bitcoin. It's I started learning about different kind of projects in the crypto space. Mm-hmm. And then I saw that 2K go up to 15K, and I was like, oh great, we're gonna go to 100K. And then I kept that money on the exchange. And then basically in January 2018, I wake up one day, huge Bitcoin crash, blah blah blah. That 15K went down to I don't know, less than a K.
Yeah.
Right. So then I realized, okay, this is a very highly volatile space. Headlines are really in control. China was we're banning Bitcoin mining and we're making Bitcoin illegal. Then India did the same and a bunch of other headlines. But then I genuinely looked at the fundamentals of the technology. I'm like, okay, it's good technology, but I don't know if I want to venture into it again. And then 2020 happened. COVID happened. I had just moved to the UAE late 2019. And then I started looking, I'm like, okay, it's easier here to actually invest in crypto compared to North America. And then I'm like, if you make any capital gains here in crypto, you're not taxed on them versus North America. So I'm like, all right, to me, it's a no-brainer. Let's put some money in. So I started investing again in Bitcoin once it hit 30K USD onwards. Again, got caught up in the crash. Cashed out some money. I bought my lovely BMW from the gains I made and gains from some other investment on the side. But then at the end of the day, I was like, okay, what do we do now? I'm like, the tech is great, but the space is not mature enough to keep on investing, right? So then something actually very cool happened last year. BlackRock fought the SEC. No, it's actually Grayscale. I don't know if you know Grayscale, fought the SEC, and they won to launch something called a Bitcoin spot ETF, which basically, if you buy an ETF, for whoever's not following through, it's an exchange trade fund where it's usually you could buy a lump of stocks or you could buy one stock. It depends on what usually hedge funds or what this fund
Yeah.
wants to allocate towards that ETF.
It's a basket, and it could
Yeah, you'll
have
explain this better than me.
but you're right. Like it's pretty much like a basket, and you can put in one stock, and people can buy and sell that stock easily compared to actually buying it on a different exchange, maybe.
Exactly.
Or it could be a basket full of different stocks at different distributions, and you can own the market or own the tech space, through that ETF.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, and there are like thousands of ETFs out there, if not there's tens of thousands.
Yeah, that's common. It's easy to make them now.
Exactly.
Currently, so
so BlackRock decided to actually launch a Bitcoin spot ETF after Grayscale, and then once that happened, we started seeing a more regulated space, right? So I'm like, okay, this is good. So I started investing heavily again, early 2024, throughout the year, and I'm like, you know what? September came. I'm gonna sit back because we had a big amount of volatility ahead, which is Trump running for presidency, and Trump is a very pro-Bitcoin guy right now. He wasn't like that like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Again, headlines keep changing, but fundamentals don't. I believe that the technology is gonna be as big as the internet when it was like coming up, right?
Interesting.
And if you look at the actual amount of internet users versus the amount of like crypto wallet holders, the crypto wallet holders, hodlers.
That's what your brain is telling you to say.
So crypto wallet users are actually growing at a pace 2x the internet users, right? So the amount, absolutely, you could look into that. So
interesting. Okay.
The amount of crypto wallets that are getting created in the space are growing at a pace. You could identify internet users by IPs, are growing at a pace that is 2x IPs.
Okay.
Right. So if we assume that actually we keep going that way, I think it's something like towards end of 2025 or 2026, we have like 1 billion crypto wallets.
Interesting.
Created, right?
And so the market for it hasn't even matured yet. But it's getting there, and
it is absolutely
it's getting more exposure, and it's going to exponentially grow.
Exactly. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And then you have someone like Trump who brings on Elon Musk and Vivek
Ramaswamy.
Yeah, Vivek. They both are now his advisors for government efficiency. But you have Musk, who's also a Bitcoin maxi. Like Tesla holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet as an asset, and they never sold any of it.
Yeah.
And he owns X. So if he wants to pump this thing tomorrow, he can. Right. So all of the cards are stacking up and lining up right now for actually having an era of crypto booming again. Supra, like he told me the other day, we got another lease on crypto, boys. That's such a funny comment. I was like,
true.
It's true. It is
like
absolutely.
The second wind.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So you have, and here's another thing regarding Bitcoin. You have the supply shocked every 4 years, roughly 4 years, where the amount of crypto being mined, extracted out of the decentralized network is cut in half. So you need to actually produce more work to get the same amount of Bitcoin out, right?
It takes more energy to produce the same amount.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's funny because I was in Egypt for a wedding 3 weeks ago, and I was talking to my buddies. One of them, he's the head of design at NFTwist, super smart, talented guy. And then the other guy is also an aerospace engineer, but with Nile Air. And we were just talking, and the discussion drifted somewhere where I'm talking about the concept of proof of work, and basically why would you put value on something? Usually it's because of the proof of work. So basically, let's say this. If you go buy a piece of gold, why is it worth something? Because someone put in the work to mine it out of like earth, right? Why do you put a price? Why do you justify spending spending the money on a flight with a price tag of, I don't know, like 10 times whatever it costs you to travel by land, for example? Because again, there's proof of work. You see like the pilots, you see the airports, you see the fuel being burnt, all that. So proof of work is one of the things that gives something value and justifies the psychological barrier of getting beyond that little price tag, right? Finding value in something or whatever, right? Okay. Like, why does it cost much? Oh, diamonds are super hard to find and to make and to cut and all of that, right?
Interesting. Okay.
You get this concept?
I
right?
do get this concept.
Bitcoin to me falls also under that in terms of actually like having a network work for you and keep consuming power. Some people say it's bad for the environment. That's a discussion I'm not going to get into. But the idea of having a global computer scattered around hundreds of thousands, if not millions of computers at this point, that is just working to basically extract this digital currency, and then that digital currency would be considered a store of wealth.
Okay.
To me, like this is a currency backed by technology and the whole concept of decentralization, and why I find it actually something worth something, in my opinion. I mean, I wouldn't say ever put all of your money in one basket. This is why you have ETFs and all of that stuff,
yeah.
right? But the idea for me to travel from Dubai to Hong Kong without having to I land in Hong Kong without having to use my bank card in any transaction in Hong Kong, and people don't actually need to know that I'm in Hong Kong, and I literally take 0.1 of a Bitcoin out of my wallet that I didn't even have to carry with me and cash it in and exchange in Hong Kong and get whatever the equivalent today, it's like $9,000 and spend that money on a vacation and travel back, and nobody knew that I was in Hong Kong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The whole concept of decentralized wealth and running away with your money, Bitcoin does that for you. You don't have to go through banks and transfer money outwards.
Okay, so you dug into the technical aspect of investing.
Yeah.
You also explained the technology and how it works. And
but see, this ties back to my mindset of investing. Only invest in something that's disruptive if you're looking to make big money, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if you just want your money to beat inflation and like beat basically the de-dollarization or what's it called? Currency, something. Devaluation of currency, right? Yeah. So that you could just, I don't know, you could buy Costco stock, or defensive funds are for that, right?
So it's like an alternative investment path.
Yeah.
And it's more akin to, there's two types of not two types, but I can categorize two business owners into two categories. For example, one of them could open up a real retail store, and another one could open up something that hasn't been done before, and one of them could start selling within 6 months, and the other one might take 10 years to come up with the idea for it to be $1 billion company and all that stuff. And you're taking that you're taking that route.
I'd rather take the hard route,
and it's reflected in the business that you're doing as well. Absolutely. It's not definitely not a retail store.
No, absolutely not. Which actually, it's like a good how can I call it, transition into NFTwist. All right, so NFTwist is I started this platform with 3 other people. One of them was my buddy who actually got me into Bitcoin in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, and because we have a very huge amount of faith in blockchain and everything being tokenized, and it's actually one of our missions to basically tokenize a lot of things through NFTs and NFTwist, and making that easy. So I started the platform with him, and then we basically brought on 2 other angel investors just to help with the bootstrapping of it. Okay. So we started that. The idea completely started as an NFT marketplace. No, first idea was, let's create an NFT and put it on the marketplace. Okay, we found an artist, we paid them, we put it on the marketplace. It was Rarible or OpenSea at the time.
Okay.
So basically we put the NFT on the marketplace. It didn't sell. It didn't do anything. I'm like, guys, why not create a marketplace? And then we're like, okay, sure. And then I basically pull out my laptop. Ali, my former co-founder, we sat in my apartment and we started coding. I'm learning about this new language called Solidity that actually codes smart contracts. And smart contracts is something that does a transaction on the blockchain.
Okay.
So I'm learning Solidity and I'm starting to write code, and then doing something through Node.js, Java, all of that. We're trying to build something, and then we realized that, okay, the smart contract aspect isn't super hard once you could tweak a few things. But then having an entire platform, that's completely something. I'm not a web designer. I'm not a web developer. I'm not someone that actually could create a website and then create APIs and do all of that crazy stuff. I'm like, all right, so we know what we don't know, which is actually a good start, right? Once you know what you don't know, you can find the right people to do whatever you're not capable of doing, right?
Exactly.
So I had my strengths. He had his strengths. His strengths are in project management. So he was basically helping run the team with the developers, making sure we're on track and all of that. And one thing that you will actually realize if you ever start a business, that it will take longer and it will cost more than you think it is, or it will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So anyhow, my strengths obviously were software, configuration management. I wrote some of the smart contracts myself on Solidity. And the idea was, the problem we were trying to solve at first was the fact that it's super hard for anyone, an average person, to get onboarded onto the crypto space and the blockchain space, right? Because first, you have to understand how the network works. You have to have some technical knowledge of or understanding of what is Ethereum, what is Solana, what are these different networks, right? And why are there so many networks?
So it's not user friendly to the average.
At the time, yeah, and it still isn't as user friendly as it should be, especially the world of NFTs. And this is what we're bringing to life. We're trying to bridge the gap between Web3 and Web2. So I'll tell you basically. So it's not user friendly. There is a psychological barrier when it comes to crypto, because it's not easy for you to jump on an exchange and have your own wallet and then deposit money and understand how you could transfer that money out of that wallet and then have sometimes cold storage. It's like a new world that some people are too lazy to get into.
Yeah.
And that's the truth, right?
Yeah.
And I always say that the biggest barrier for technological adoption is human psychology.
Okay.
There's no bigger barrier for the acceleration of technical or technological adoption as human psychology.
Okay.
Right? If the tech is there, why is I'll tell you this, aviation, we'll just jump back into that. Airplanes could completely take off on their own and land on their own. You don't need a pilot in there. The technology is there. Would people travel if it's the case?
I want to know that whoever's flying it has skin in the game.
Exactly.
I want to know
Absolutely.
that if this goes down,
he's got stake.
He's stressed as well.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Right.
yeah.
But the technology is there.
Yeah.
The psychology is not allowing us to adopt it. Right. So that's my point. So in my humble opinion, once people start realizing, oh, it's super easy to actually do this and that, or if they found a solution that is easy enough to get into that space, they'll do that. Right. So if I will say this, if I will say you have to go download a Chrome extension called MetaMask, all right? And then you have to go create an account on some exchange and buy crypto on that exchange, because you cannot on-ramp fiat money onto MetaMask, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go buy USD Tether, whatever crypto from that exchange, and then send it to MetaMask. But first you have to set up MetaMask to the right network and then make that transfer. And then take that MetaMask, go on a NFT marketplace, connect your wallet, and then purchase the NFT. And then now you have the NFT in MetaMask, which is great, but no one can see it. Does that, it's like a piece, it's like a Mona Lisa you have, for example, that's just sitting in a vault. Nobody gets to see it. What's the point?
Nope. Yeah.
Right? What's the point? Unless I have this NFT that gives me some exclusivity, some access, some status, right? That I could display, then it's worth something. Because, okay, the Mona Lisa is great, but if there's no one to see it, is it actually that great? Right?
You buy it so for you to advertise it.
Exactly.
And to enjoy it.
Exactly.
And if nobody's part of enjoying it is sharing it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Right. And again, I don't know if you've read this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He says basically according to Freud, and he was a big believer of how Freudian psychology worked, he said the two things that motivate people in the world, one is sex, two is basically the sense of purpose, the sense of feeling important. Right? That little, we're all cut from the same cloth. We have a little bit of an ego. I want to feel that I matter. Right? I want to feel like I'm special. Whatever. Right? Yeah. So that's that, and that comes into what NFTwist kind of does, because what we do is we create traction between a business and a customer through NFTs. Right? And the only way that was going to be possible if the whole process is seamless. If I walk into a restaurant, a hotel, a concert, and I have to go and download MetaMask, set it up, and then connect it, and to go through that entire process just to get an NFT, I'll be like, is it really is it worth it?
Yeah.
Really? Right.
There's a barrier to action.
Exactly.
There's a barrier to entry for people.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And basically it was the process, and it still kind of is for the most part, because there were no smart contracts in place to actually make this whole transfer of this digital asset seamless, quick, easy. And this is where NFTwist comes in to bridge the gap. You download our mobile app, which we're releasing soon. You scan a QR code, and that's it. Now you're in. You're part of that NFT club that this business has.
Interesting.
That this event organizer has, or this airline, this flight, for example.
Okay. And so what are typical examples of how a business would use the platform to engage with their clients or customers or fans?
Absolutely. A very good question. So basically, first of all, when you build a community around you and you make that community feel special, they become more loyal to you as a business. Okay. Second of all, the NFT is also for the business means of marketing, because the NFT basically has something that usually reflects the brand identity, and at the very least the logo, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm using NFTwist with you and we follow each other, I could see basically, oh, you have this NFT. I could see that you like this business, right? So for the business, the first part is marketing aspect. Second part is maintaining and retention of their customers through loyalty, through basically making them feel special by giving them some small extra perks. Like I always say, like the easiest one is if you go to a busy restaurant, like if I'm an NFT holder, just literally it's like a fast track pass.
It's like an exclusivity.
Exactly, exclusivity, right? So when you as a business tell a customer, hey, by the way, your bill is 230 dirhams, and if you spend 250, you basically get this NFT for free, and you're part of our exclusive club. You've always almost guaranteed a seat at the table. If we're busy, you get in faster. You get access to a basically exclusive menu of like 2-3 drinks only you can have or you can order because you're part of our NFT club, right? You get treated in a different way. The customer will, if they like the place, will come across and go beyond the psychological barrier of spending that extra 20 dirhams, because in the future he will get that in return in terms of special treatment and exclusivity. Right. So it's a win-win for everybody. The business improved their KPIs by upselling that extra 20 dirhams or whatever it was that the price point is. And then the customer basically feels more appreciated the next time he or she goes back, right?
It's almost like, I don't want to say one step, maybe a few steps above the bare minimum of engagement with your audience and or users. And the bare minimum for me that I could think of is MailChimp, for example. Right. You know, and you're sending out newsletters to update them on what's going on maybe, and they're subscribing. And so this one takes a little bit more of a personalized touch to it. Absolutely.
And the business can push notifications onto their community, right? And their how could I say this? Their traction with that community that has their NFT and their conversion rate is much higher than just putting out an Instagram post to the public. Do you get it?
How much of this is because by nature it sounds like it's scarce? It's like whatever the client or user would be looking for. It's almost like he's competing for that NFT,
right?
To be able to get that exclusivity. Like, is there a scarcity aspect to it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when human psychology also values things that are scarce, right? Aside from that proof of work, right?
Right.
So it depends really. So I'll tell you this. What we do is we're a next generation loyalty program through a next generation social media platform that engages communities and brands. So brands create communities through NFTs, and that traction happens with, like, first step is getting the NFT and then push notifications and such. And then one of the things that we do is actually the whole scarcity thing is very cool because so I don't know if you know how Marriott has their loyalty program or Emirates set up. You get to tiers. Right? You start with like basic silver, and then you get to gold, and then platinum, and Emirates is blue, then silver, then gold, then platinum, then I can't remember what was the last one. So the idea is we actually bring that also to your average business without them having to create any kind of infrastructure, just through NFTs. Like basically you get an NFT, you go back, you scan the QR code, you get 2 visits out of 5. Once you reach 5 visits at that place, first step is to get the NFT. Then once you reach 5 visits, by the way, these numbers are arbitrary.
Yeah.
It depends on the business. You get to a next tier, and then you get to a higher tier. So the whole scarcity actually comes when you go visit that place a lot.
And you're on like the ultimate fast track lane versus the regular lane,
absolutely.
or like the middle lane.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you maybe get more discount. Maybe you get an extra free drink on whatever day. You know what I mean? It depends.
Yeah.
So we give businesses the complete freedom of shaping a loyalty program that is completely different than your basic loyalty programs out there, with a social aspect that comes with marketing also, because people, if they feel special because of the NFT, they could go brag about the NFT to their friends. Hey, why are we going to this place? I have the NFT of this pizzeria, and they're absolutely gorgeous. Like,
yeah. No, I think what just clicked with me is it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there's a gap in the market for businesses to create loyalty programs to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Or if you don't want to call it loyalty.
It's the same exact thing almost over and over and over again.
But instead of them contacting a whatever company that can come in and create that for them,
right?
It's as easy as downloading an app and registering with you and customizing to their needs what that loyalty program could be.
Exactly.
So you're creating this new sort of marketplace. I shouldn't say marketplace. But you're creating this. You're simplifying the process for businesses to go in and create a rewards program for themselves.
Absolutely, through NFTs, and basically everything is tokenized on the blockchain with that. So
and just one last question.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does competition look like in this space?
So right now we don't. Again, I've been doing my research. I haven't done it in the last 2 months, just because I've been busy with the mobile app launch and whatever. But we haven't found anything out there that actually does what we do. That is basically a loyalty program through NFTs with a social network aspect intertwined in it, and having the loyalty program go through different tiers and offering free things as you move from one tier to another. So we haven't found that. We found something in actually there's a company in Munich, Berlin, and they actually just shut down. They ran out of funds and cash, sadly enough, because I don't like seeing that. I'd actually rather have the space grow, and the TAM actually grow with it, right? So the total addressable market would grow with it. But they were basically doing something different. You go buy the NFT with your credit card, and then you show the business when you go there that, oh, hey, I have this NFT. You get free drinks, or you get something out of it. Yeah. So for us, we don't make the customer pay for the NFT at all. Actually, nobody wants to, well, it's a big statement, but the majority of people don't want to pay for an NFT. Yeah. But they're okay paying for food and getting an NFT with it. They're okay going to a concert and getting an NFT with it.
Yeah. So it's on the business side of that.
Exactly.
That you sort of make your money or
absolutely. Okay. I mean, right now we're really we're not in the whole money making stage yet. We're like pre-revenue because we're trying to build a big user base. We're trying to bring it to market, and part of the cost of changing human and behavioral psychology regarding NFTs is basically running the platform and taking on the costs ourselves. At least probably for the foreseeable 6 months, we'll continue that way, just to bring in more people, more businesses, and then maybe we'll launch our own crypto token. Yeah. Maybe we'll launch like a funding round and then start having to make money. So we'll find a way to basically.
It's all about positioning yourself, like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. See?
And then something will come.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
It's been great. I would love to have another hour, honestly, but we're out of time.
I don't think we'll run out of things to talk about.
Yeah, but thank you for coming on the show, and it's funny. I learned something new, that you look at life. Something new about you.
All right.
You look at life from an engineer's lens.
That's true.
That's your starting point.
That's true.
And so someone else can answer the same question the same way, but from a different standpoint or a different point of view. And it's interesting. I think you to answer the question I asked you, yeah, you are an engineer at core. You didn't fall into it and go like, yeah, I need to make a career out of it. So
No.
so that's prevalent for sure from this conversation. Where can people find you?
Instagram mo.shabaan, mo.shabaan. You could follow NFTwist.io.
Okay.
That's the name of our company. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn if you want. Don't know if we're gonna have like a much of a huge discussion regarding anything other than aviation and NFTs, but you could do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well, thanks again, man.
Cheers.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to having this conversation in another year or two. See where you land with the NFTwist journey.
I hope we're doing it from my office.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, I think so.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.